Hello, everyone. This is Sean from the Soccernostalgia blog. I have the pleasure to interview Atlético Mineiro's supporters ambassador in New Jersey, Mr. Stanley Cunha. Mr. Cunha has appeared before on a podcast discussing the Brazilian national team in the year 1989. This interview is separate from a podcast series. This video interview will serve as a companion piece to a written blog presentation on the fortunes of Brazil's 1982 generation in the Italian Serie A. Hello, Stanley. Welcome again.
Hello, Shan. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk about soccer or football, and especially about that team, 1982, which is an amazing team.
Indeed, and brings back a lot of good memories for all of us of that certain age range. As the Serie A was getting stronger and signing the best available foreign players, was it a formality that much of this 1982 squad would end up there?
Oh, yes, of course, with players of that level of making themselves available, I mean, those players were the cream de la cream of the football by that time. So naturally, after the Italian market had opened again for the foreigners players, so it was very natural that players of that level will join the Serie A, right?
So let's start off with Paulo Roberto Falcao. He actually joined Roma and the Serie A in 1980. Can you summarize his impact in Italy?
Yes, that's easy. So he's the eighth king, right, of Rome. So that's how the people of Rome called him by that time. So that summarized his impact in the team and in the city. He joined a very good team, right? So Roma had achieved good results before him. I'm just guessing now that the Roma president, he tried to build up a team, a very good team. He was aiming the title by that time. So he hired Lidholm
Niels
that played,
Lidholm, yes.
yes, that he played the 1958 World Cup. So Roma, I think they ended second or third on the year, the season before. So he was trying to build a strong team to win the title. Roma had a very good team by that moment. So let's say that Falcon was just icing the cake, right? Yeah, so the impact was huge. Before that, he had won three national titles in Brazil. He was regarded as a very good player for the Brazilian press in general. So, yeah, he added a lot of not only technical skills, but his mentality of being a winning player, a winning mentality. Of course, the impact was huge for that team.
Yes, and he would allow Roma to win the Scudetto in 1982-83 season, the season after the World Cup. His partnership with Bruno Conti, Carlo Ancelotti, among others, a very good
Yes,
Roma side.
Ancelotti, Bruzzo.
Bruzo, of course,
Yeah.
yeah. And we have to mention that in the following season, 1983-84, he helped Roma reach the final of the Champions Cup at Roma. The final was at Rome, but Rome lost in a penalty kick shootout to Liverpool. And that was the beginning of his, I guess, decline with Roma.
After winning the title in 82, 83, Falcon had physical problems. So he had problems in his knees. That led him to lose trust in the Roma's board because the relationship between them kind of degraded during that time.
Around this time, there were also rumors that he might join Inter. That never happened. Things would turn sour for him in the 84-85 season, where he was mostly injured, and I think he played only like 4 matches. The problem with the management started when he traveled to New York City for an operation without their authorization.
But that, if I'm not mistaken, that happened after the problems that he had with the board, because they lost the trust on each other after he got injured, because the president thought that, oh, it doesn't work for us to have him paying tons of money because he was such a good player. So the president, the relationship became bad because of that, because the president wanted to, get rid of that amount of money, of that salary. And so after he Falcão lost the confidence or the trust on the president, so he decided, okay, so I have a problem, and I gotta heal my knee. So I'm gonna look for the best doctors, and most of them are in US. And so I'm not confident to treat my knee here, since the relationship in the club itself, considering it, the board and everything, since it's not good, so I have to try somebody else. I had to try heal it with people that I trust, although of course he probably wouldn't know the doctor in US, but somebody referred him a good doctor. So I believe, if the info that I had, everything that I read tells me that the problem that the trip to New York City happened after the problems that he had with the board.
When he did that, though, his contract was terminated, and that's when he returned to Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
Now, let's go to the next players to join the Italian Serie A. We have Edinho and Dirceu, who joined the Italian league during the 1982-83 season. Let's start off with Edinho. How would you rate his 5 seasons at Udinese?
Well, in my opinion, it was very good, because we should consider some aspects of the time, right? So Edinho was playing for a small team in Italy. By that time, those teams, they had a limitation of foreigners to play in Italy, 2 players, if I'm not mistaken, right? So we should consider as well that the other teams, the big teams in Italy, so they had very good defenders. They probably would prioritize attackers or midfielders for those teams. So Edinho wouldn't have much space on those big teams. So playing for Udinese, and as he played for 5 seasons, playing against the best midfielders in the world, the best strikers, and he managed to be there for 5 seasons. So he did it very well, in my opinion. And he was recognized by that, doing so. I mean, after being for 5 seasons in Udinese, so the board and the fans, they recognized him as a very, very good player. So we can summarize it as a very good stay in Udine.
And he returned home to Flamengo in 1987. Now let's get to Dirceu. He played 5 seasons in Italy, going from club to club. So he was at Verona for 1982-83 season. He joined Napoli for 83-84, Ascoli 84-85, Como 85-86, and finally Avellino 86-87. It seems like his spells at these clubs were not particularly successful. Why do you think he spends so much time in Italy?
Well, I would use the same reasoning as I used with Edinho. So Dirceu, he was a very good player, but he was not in the top shelf of Brazilian football, right? So, well, with that being said, so we should consider that, again, the big teams, they had several options to hire, not only in Europe, but in Brazil, Argentina, and so on, all the big football market. So Dirceu, he was like a second tier player, and for those teams, small or mid table teams with low budget, he was a perfect player. That's how I feel about him because he was good, not good enough to be on the top shelf.
I would add one thing. I think he was in his 30s, so at this point, he was perhaps considered yesterday's man, nearing the end of his career. Let's remember he was one of Brazil's stars during the 1978 World Cup.
Yes.
So by now he was not the player that he once was.
Yeah, so he was around 30 years old when he arrived in Italy.
Right.
And I would say that too. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
We have to mention that following his Serie A experience, he returned to Brazil. He was sadly killed in a car accident in 1995, aged only 43.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we come to the 1983-84 season, where we have four players from this 1982 team joining the Serie A. Before taking a closer look at Cerezo and Zico, let's discuss Batista, who joined Lazio, and Pedrinho, who joined Catania. And obviously, Cerezo joined Roma and Zico Udinese. How was it looked upon in Brazil when four players joined the Serie A in the transfer window?
Starting with Pedrinho and Batista, they were like second tier players as well. But again, using the same reasoning, they matched with low budget clubs. It made sense for us to have players like that, like those playing for small or mid table clubs. It was not like a surprise to have so many players going out that time because that transition started a couple years before, like with Roberto Dinamite going to Barcelona, or even Juari. He played for, I think, a team in
Inter at some point. Yeah. Inter,
it.
a number of teams in Italy he played. Yeah, but Inter was a
Yeah,
significant one. Yeah. And
yes.
Cremonese. Yeah.
Cremonese, yes. So it started a little bit before Falcão, which was the biggest player to go to Italy, right? So that was a kind of a natural process, right? So even considering that those players they were in an advanced age, considering the football at that time, they are all about 30 years old, all of them. The Brazilian press, the Brazilian fans, they understood the natural process of seeing the good players going to play for big teams in Serie A.
As far as Batista, he spent 2 seasons at Lazio. He was relegated with the team in 1985. He joined Avellino, another small provincial side, but he left midway through the season to join the Portuguese side Belenense. How is his Italian adventure looked upon?
So Batista, I never heard him talking about his experience in Italy. I mean, talking deeply about that. So he always mentioned that was good, that was nice, the culture of football exchange, and so on. So I would assume that some things that happens in Brazil happened in Rome by that time. And what is it? When Falcão and Batista, they played together in Internacional during the 70s. So they won the three national titles together. So when Roma hired or signed up with Falcão, so Lazio, which is the main rival, okay, we're gonna have the other one. So we're gonna have the Laziale, Falcão Laziale, that will be Batista, right? So this is my guess that okay, let's have the best midfielders that ruled in Brazil during that time. So what is the other one? It's Batista. So it's my again, I'm guessing, I'm just speculating here that they would have much better options considering not I'm not saying that Batista was not good. He was, but he was old as well. So Cerezo will be a better bet at that point, right? So I think that there is a marketing action behind this.
Pedrinho was one of the more unknown players of the Santana team, and he rarely featured. He joined a newly promoted side that was expected to struggle. The side was relegated. We're talking about Catania. The side it was relegated, but Pedrinho stayed one more year in the Serie B. I assume not much would have been expected of him playing for a small, struggling side.
Yes, yes. Well, and for a simple reason, because he was a left back, highly skilled left back, very good. But well, a left back is not the kind of player that would lead a team for good achievements. So yeah, we couldn't expect Pedrinho to lead the team as a technical reference. Yeah, it makes sense.
So, before we start discussing Cerezo and Zico, their transfers were initially invalidated by the Federation. I believe Cerezo had signed after the transfer deadline, and the transfer of Zico was a bit controversial because the president of Udinese, Lamberto Mazza, was also affiliated to Zanussi, a company. And so there were rules against third party involvement. But there was such an outcry to have these two transfers go through that eventually an inquiry commission was set up by the Italian Olympic Committee that cleared these transfers. Let's start with Cerezo. He would have a very successful stay in Italy. Would you go through his Roma phase and his transition to Sampdoria at a time where I assume many would have felt that leaving Roma to join Sampdoria was an indication that he was winding down his career?
Starting from the end, yes, that would be an indication that his career was ending up, right? Because in 30 something years at that time, with the medicine and everything, the physical preparation, it was totally different than it is right now. So it makes sense that everybody felt he was ending up his career. But and now, starting from the beginning, yeah, when Cerezo went to Rome, he left Atlético Mineiro right after the end of the Brazilian season, right? The Brazilian season is kind of confusing. Sometimes he started by the beginning of the year, sometimes it started by the half of the year, by the end of the year, it varied a lot in the past. So when he arrived at Rome, so he was not in a good condition. He was not in a good shape. And so he struggled a lot in the beginning to adapt himself to the team. And of course, on top of that, there is a language a challenge, cultural challenge, and everything. So his first season, I heard him saying about that, was not that good, although he played 2 games, right? And he managed to help the team during that season. On the second season, which was 84, 85, right?
Yes.
So he managed to play more. Says that his phase in Rome was, for him, was very good. That was when he totally adapted himself to not only the Serie A football style, but to playing abroad, because we should keep in mind that before that, Brazilian players, they only played against Brazilians. And only like twice, 3 times a year, they played against Europeans or South Americans, even South Americans. So he says that his development as a international player happened on the second season. If we look at the Roma achievement was not that great, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't
Yeah, they finished
win.
mid-table, yeah, that season.
Yes, but it was very important. It's true because in the next year they won the Coppa Italia, and he was about to be selected to the 1986 World Cup. It didn't happen, but because he was injured, that there's a controversy on that because Tele Santana claimed that he was injured, but after he's being cut off the team, he flew to Rome and he scored the goal, the winning goal of the Coppa Italia of that year again. So, summarizing the answer, yes, his phase in Rome or at Roma was very good for him to develop his international career as a player and ending up to playing for Sampdoria when he achieved the best results.
Let's not forget, he won the Scudetto as a 36-year-old at Sampdoria.
Yeah.
Not to mention a couple of Coppa Italia victories to go along with that. He stayed at Sampdoria until 1992 as a 37-year-old, and following that, he joined Tele Santana at Sao Paulo. So,
oh yeah. But until until he met Tele Santana again, so he says that his relationship with him was merely like a professional, a coach and player, and that's it. But they got really connected in São Paulo in 1992.
Yeah, and he would win the Intercontinental Cup in 1993 against AC Milan as a 38-year-old, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was elected the man of the match.
So now let's get to Zico. It's one of the greatest regrets. It's a tale of two seasons. A memorable first season with Udinese and 19 goals, only behind Michel Platini's 20 goals as capocannoniere. And the second season marred by injury and tax fraud accusations that led to his departure and return to Flamengo in 1985. Can you discuss these two seasons, contrasting seasons?
Oh yeah, so that's easy. I watched a lot of Zico's interviews regarding to his career in Italy. So what he says is that, well, his first season, it's very clear that he was amazing. He playing for Udinese, which is a small club, and as you said, he was only behind Platini as the scoring table. So Udinese, again, a small club. Zico, he was a top level player, right? The first shelf player. So he clearly deserved to play for like Milan or Inter or even Juventus, right? But he managed to do a great season. But the reason that the second season was not that good, he says that the Udinese board, they promised him that they would have a very competitive team. So he was hoping to compete at the same level as the big teams, and that couldn't happen with us. Not it's not only because it's a small team, but there was the players limitation as well. So they had to find Italians good players to play for them. I mean, the top Italians players to play for them to have a very competitive team. And of course, those players were at the biggest clubs. So it would be hard to get them from the big clubs. So that on top of the injuries that he had, this factor that the lack of being competitive helped him to make the decision to leave the team.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there was all the tax fraud accusations that it's unclear whether they were just trying to push him out themselves. I mean, the Italian authorities. And
Yes,
so he left in a very acrimonious note, but I'm sure he was very happy to come back home at this point.
yes. So that helped him to make the decision as well, because we should consider that playing with, when you're a player, it doesn't matter, even regular job position. So you got to be, it's hard to focus when you have, something in the background bothering you. And that is something that probably helped him to make the decision, being abroad and with that kind of accusation.
There are some who felt that he could have been to Udinese what Maradona was to Napoli. Do you think this would have been impossible since Maradona was relatively in early phase of his career while Zico was somewhat nearing the end of his career?
Well, with you, it's not because of the players, and it's not because of the age. I believe it's Napoli is in a different level. Is a big club in Italy. Is They are not famous as Milan or Inter or Juventus, but they have a huge amount of fans. They are in a different level, and of course, they have more money, or they had more money by that time. So they managed to hire better players. So that helped Maradona to do what he did. And I believe if Zico had the same tools, better players, with a team with the mentality of winning, the willing of winning, that what happened in Napoli. Napoli, the Napoli board, they were willing to win the tournament. And Udinese, I'm just assuming that, right? I believe they knew they hired a very good player, but their goals were to be, I don't know, maybe fourth, fifth position, something like that, which will be very good for them, right? So yes, my answer to you will be yes and no. It depends on the circumstances.
Now we come to the last two members of this group who joined the Serie A in 1984-85 season. Socrates joined Fiorentina and Junior joined Torino. First, let's discuss Socrates and his disastrous season at Fiorentina. What were the common reasons listed as to why he feels he failed there?
Uh, well, Socrates, basically, we can summarize it that he couldn't adapt himself to the Italian lifestyle. I mean, the players' lifestyle, the players' training sessions, because he played while in Brazil. He played for Corinthians, and they, for example, just to give you an example, he helped to establish what they called the Democracia Corintiana, which is the Corinthians democracy, something like that. So the players, they had no, like, in Brazil they have a concentration, which is something that the
A
you know
group get together to train and things like that at a
and
secluded hotel or something. Yeah.
yeah, 2 days, one day before the game, so they get together, stay in the hotel or something, before the match. And so Socrates, what he said, I watched some interviews that, and saw him saying that in Italy everything came back. Like he had to, a lot of training sessions, that something that he a long time to get rid of. So he had problems with the concentration. And so this is something that impacted his adaptation in Italy. And of course, I believe the Italian football by that time, it was very intense, as it always was, as it always probably will be. It's totally different than the comparing to Brazilian football, for example. Brazilian football is something with a slow pace, right? A lot of passing games. And Italy, by that time, was man-to-man marking, a lot of back and forth running. So this is something that you got to be in a good shape to do that kind of game, right? We are not questioning his ability to adapt, technically saying, to adapt himself to the game, to the Italian game style of play. But everything that was in the background helped him to not adapt himself.
Right. Yeah, there's this anecdote. I don't know if it's true. Apparently, one of Fiorentina's, I guess either the technical director or one of the directors, he mentioned like a player like Eraldo Pecci, one of Fiorentina's players. He had to sacrifice not eating something like pasta, not to gain weight, while Socrates was always walking around with a cigarette and a beer in his hand. He was implying that he was not disciplined enough for the rigors of Serie A. That may be a reason why he didn't succeed. But it was also reported that apparently he claimed that some of his teammates deliberately refused to pass to him. Is that true, or that's just
I heard. Well, I don't know specifically saying about that story that somebody was not passing the ball to him, but I heard him saying that his relationship with the group was really bad. So he spent most of the time by himself. And when he saw that, okay, I'm not gonna make it, let's try to end this as soon as possible. I read that, or I heard him saying, I can't remember, that he spent a lot of his time attending courses in Florence because he was a doctor, right? He was very educated man. So he was studying arts and something like that. So yeah, so his relationship with the group was terrible.
And we have to remember the captain and leader of Fiorentina, Giancarlo Antonioni. He was out injured for a long time, for more than a year. So maybe if had he been around, maybe he would have been able to. It might have been easier to integrate Socrates into the team, but who knows? That's just conjecture at this point. And
Yes.
he returned after this unhappy season. He joined Flamingo, and where eventually he would retire in 87 after Lazzaroni, whom we discussed last time, dropped him. And sadly, he passed away in 2011, aged only 57.
I would put a note here that probably if he had Antonioni playing with him, and which was a very good player, so that would be something inspiring, right, for him to to do a good job in Fiorentina. Probably, just a speculation.
Yeah, and again, is his solitary season in Italy is often referenced as one of Serie A's worst ever transfers, and it's just a mystery how such a gifted player did not adapt, and it's such a shame.
Yeah,
But yeah,
but as you mentioned, even after when he returned to Flamengo, he couldn't make it as well. I believe he couldn't manage to his lifestyle with the athlete life anymore. So that wasn't matching at all. So his time in Flamengo was not that good. There is no highlights during his period in Flamengo.
so now let's come to Junior, who had a successful spell in Italy. First with Torino, and then as a veteran helping a newly promoted side like Pescara. How do you summarize his Italian career?
So Junior, as all the other players that we mentioned so far, when he went to Italy, he was already a 30 years old guy, 30 something. He made a very clever decision by that time when he decided to play in the midfield in Torino because he knew at that age he couldn't go back and forth playing as a left back anymore. And he was skilled enough to play in the midfield. And as a midfielder, so he managed to have a first season, a very good first season. If I'm not mistaken, they ended up second.
Yes, finished second behind Verona and qualified for the UEFA Cup. Yes.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, the second season
they also qualified, yeah, for the UEFA Cup. Yeah.
Yes, and so his career in Italy, despite the fact that he was around the 30s, was very successful if we consider that 30 years guys by that time were most of them they were ending up their careers.
Yes, and let's not forget when he returned to Brazil as a 37-year-old, he made a comeback to the national team in 1992 with
leading the team.
Yeah,
leading the team. Not only playing but leading the team.
Yes, before he retired in 1993, I believe. Yes.
Yes.
So, on balance, do you think Falcao and Cerezo were perhaps the most successful of this generation, followed perhaps by Junior?
Yes, indeed. So Falcao, the eighth king of Rome, right? Doing what he did, so he's still recognizing Rome as one of the top players that they had. He's in the Roma Hall of Fame, something like that. I'm just guessing here, but yeah, I remember to watch a game, Roma's game, like a couple years ago, and he was there at the Olímpico Stadium, and he was in the camera at the stadium screen, and so the crowd was like, "Oh my God!" and applauding him. So yeah, of course, and Cerezo, well, he managed to win the championship with Sampdoria, which is doesn't belong to the the big club. And remember, I was in his last game when he retired in Brazil. I was in the stadium. I was watching Atlético Mineiro in Milan, and I remember Maldini scouting him when they made the substitution. Maldini scouted him like as a reference, scouting him outside of the pitch, and so all the Italian players of Milan, it was like they made like a corridor for him to get off the pitch.
Very well respected for his longevity in Italy. I'm curious to know if you would know if Eder or say Oscar, did they ever receive offers from Italian clubs?
I don't know about Oscar. Never heard about offers for him, but Eder, yes. And Eder had offers from Milan, Barcelona, Atlético Madrid, and there's another team. I'm not sure, but might be Roma, maybe. But he had, and that caused him a lot of problems because he wanted to leave Atlético Mineiro because they were offering tons of money by that time. Cerezo and Zico, just quick note here, they were sold by that was the the highest transaction in the football history, Brazilian football history by that time, millions of dollars, and the exchange rate was really made it even bigger than it was for the Brazilian club's perspective, right? So Eder wanted to leave, but the Atlético Mineiro president by that time, he refused to sell the best player. Reinaldo, for example, that was not in the Serie A, but he had offers. He had an offer from Paris Saint-Germain, if I'm not mistaken, but he refused to sell him. He had no chance about Cerezo because not only because of the amount of money, but I believe he thought that he could manage the midfield with something else, with somebody else. And of, he couldn't keep the same level, but something similar. But he knew that a striker like Reynaldo or a forward as Eder would be hard to get something or somebody as good as them. So he refused to sell those kind of players, mainly the let's say the idols of the team. So that causing a lot of problems, Eder, in Brazil because he wanted to leave. The president refused to sell him. So and the fans started to contest him. Oh, you don't want to stay, you want to leave our club and so on. So it took a long time for him to fix it, to fix the situation.
In closing, what is the overall legacy of the Brazil 1982 team in Italian calcio? Do you feel things would have been different had most of them joined at a younger age, like Falcao?
Oh yes, definitely. And especially if for example, if Zico had a, a better opportunity playing for a big club, for example, if Eder had joined one of those teams, even other players like Reinaldo, Serginho Chulapa, the center forward, I believe he had his style was very close to the Italian style, right? So he I believe he will be very successful over there playing for an Italian team. So definitely they would make a lot of difference playing if they had joined those teams at younger ages. Probably I would say that they have the same success as Platini did, for example. That Platini joined the Juventus in a good age, 20 something. If I can't remember now. So definitely, that will make a difference.
With that, I would like to thank you for this interview and hope to have more Brazil related discussions in the future.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Let's keep the ball rolling and thank you.